Okay, we are being recorded. I wanted to welcome everybody to the next in our series of Financial Leadership Academy webinars. I just launched the poll, so we'll be publishing those results a little bit later. And just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in, give this opportunity to educate. And our speaker today is Jack Brooks, the legendary Jack Brooks, the Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic United Methodist Foundation, and sort of one of the dreamers of the Financial Leadership Academy. Jack, I'd like to tell us one unique thing about you that people don't know.
Something that people don't know? I don't know. I guess about myself, I garden. Maybe people don't know that. That's another thing that happens. I've been planting like crazy because normally this would be annual conference time, and I'd be busy at 3 annual conferences in 4 weeks. But this season, I've been able to plant some garden and seeds, and it's made me think of a whole lot around planting seeds and see what grows, and also about what we sow is what we reap. So I think in the coming days, I'll be writing a little bit of a blog or an article about what we sow is what we reap. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit today.
Good. All right. Well, thank you. And so we're going to, without further ado, Annabelle, myself, and Jack, I'm going to turn it over to you. Establishing legacy giving.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is probably the most requested single information that we get at the Mid-Atlantic Foundation. I can see also from the polls, and what Frank said is so many churches do not have any endowed resources. And endowment and establishing a legacy program, if you don't have one in your church, and reactivating one if you do have one in the church, is really vital to where I think our future is. I think Daryl shared with us a few minutes ago about the average age of our people that are in the United Methodist Church and how we skew so much higher than what is in society. And with that, I think that piece leads to legacy. And legacy is a very interesting topic, I think, to me. This is one of a series of webinars that we'll be doing. Normally, under session 3, we would have been going through the process of not just today's topic of establishing legacy giving, but then how to talk to donors, how to create the team, how to create the endowment plan, how to manage the endowment, and how to do a distribution of the resources. So this is a multifaceted program. You won't have seen sections 2 and 3. We're going to stop with this today, just the first hour about establishing legacy giving in your church. With that, I'm hearing a lot of people, and they're saying what hard times there are for faith donors right now. The Lilly Family School of Philanthropy did a research piece in April of this year. And what they're finding is something a little different than that Americans are doubling down on philanthropy in the face of this adverse COVID-19. Now, your church may not be doing that, but this is what they're saying across all philanthropy, all nonprofits, and what's generally happening. Nonprofits and faith communities are taking advantage of the current environment, but they're streamlining, as Daryl said, and so many of you are doing, about virtual online worship, changing the way that we're doing things with you for the FLA. We're forced into this change, and all nonprofits and faith communities are doing that, and it's giving people an opportunity to streamline communication. Many of you watched the video that we created early on. Annabelle did a wonderful job of creating of the cartoon, Emergency Funding for Your Church. This was staying on the front end proactively. We're now shifting on how you maintain that momentum. The Lilly School tracks during giving so far has seen record 7-figure gifts, meaning people that had the opportunity to maybe in the capacity to leave a large gift. We're seeing some large gifts in their study that would not have been present otherwise under a normal situation. So people are responding with large gifts, and several human service organizations are seeing new donors unprompted gifts. This is where a donor calls and says, I'd like to support you. How can I do it? So vital for all of our students to be able to have the what you would do if you received a gift today. What would you do if you received a gift today? And if it's to pay the bills of the church, that's not visionary for somebody that says, I want to have an immediate impact today on changing the lives or sustaining something for people. That's the answer that you have to have. Also, regular donors to those organizations are making larger gifts, and we're seeing this in some other polling that we've been doing. That some churches, about 20–25%, Frank has the actual numbers. It fluctuates a little bit because we're doing a lot of webinars beyond FLA where we're asking this question, but churches are ahead of their plan and their pledges. Some are falling behind. Virtual events are raising more than in the past. Again, this is in all nonprofits. This was a big season. Spring is a huge season. I've gone to a fundraiser before where they raise in one evening close to $3.5 million. So not being able to do that, they had to shift how they would do that. And they are continuing to have a virtual event. And quite honestly, it saves them a lot of money because they're not going through the expense of the dinner, the entertainment, and that portion of the evening. Instead, it's going direct to donors and virtual types of events for fundraising. This would be something that would not be your Sunday worship. It would be something extra to, I know somebody said something about being able to raise the money for the technology or raise the money that they need during this period of time to advance the cause of mission and ministry in the church. And that is an example of a special fundraising or a virtual event built around that. That today's the day we're going to do this. And I've seen this also emerge in the nonprofit world. Planned giving, however, in the topic we're going to talk about today, sometimes suffers a setback during this period of time. It'll be unique to me because COVID-19, we see the death count all the time. I think many people today have been faced with their mortality over COVID-19. I know, people are scared of catching it. People in a certain age group are really vulnerable to this, and it's given pause to people that maybe have never thought about planning for their eternal life. It gives them the opportunity to pause and start to think about that. And, when people are sitting home, I know my father's been thinking about revising his will. Many of you know in my own personal life, 2 years ago, I lost my mother. 9 months ago, I lost my wife. And then, my brother is struggling with liver cancer right now. I've had to face mortality because people around me have passed. I've had a number of friends in my peer group, 4 of them in the last 12 months pass away, and they're all my age or younger. These are times that people shift to saying, what is life all about? What is my legacy? And how would I want to empower, and what would I want to leave behind? Legacy and planned giving has a whole language in its own, and this is probably the starting point that's most confusing for people and why some churches have a hard time to even know how to communicate around this. So today I wanted to be able to give you a little bit of a simplistic way to look at it and get away about what is deferred giving, planned giving, and legacy giving. There's many different definitions. If you Google search it, you'll see these information pieces that are out there. A donation is made by an individual through a will or other formal designation. It's usually something that is a lasting piece that is going to live beyond their life. This is the starting point for legacy and planned giving. Deferred gifts, planned gifts, and legacy giving. Deferred giving, prior to the industry that there is today about gift planning, they're professional gift planners. That's all they do. Colleges and universities hire development offices. We have some people coming up and speaking to you in a couple of weeks that's all they do for a college, a university, and for a nonprofit. That is an industry among itself. The shift happened years ago when it stopped from deferred giving as just a way that grandmother and grandfather talked about doing a gift in the 1980s and prior, to where today it's very specialized field. There's people that do this professionally for very, very complex gift and gift modeling that they do. That shifted it to planned giving because there were suddenly planners on the scene that did planned giving. That's what they do professionally. Like a financial planner, there's also gift planners. Not every financial planner plans for somebody's end of life care or for legacy giving. They may want to protect the children or the portfolio, the inheritance, the assets, the houses, but they may not do it from a complex view of looking at it from the tax implications, legacy, wills, trusts, estate work. Not every attorney practices this. So it's not as simple as going to somebody and having a real will written. I say it's almost malpractice, but many attorneys never even ask a client if they want to make any bequests, or they don't prompt it, or they don't give pause to think about it. They basically write a will out of a software kit, present it to the individual. Somebody has a husband and they leave everything to the husband. Somebody has a wife or another spouse, they leave everything to that person, vice versa. And then to the kids. And then there's proration among the number of children. If you have 2 children, 3 children, 5 children, whatever it would be. Gift planning really needs to be brought forward by the donor to the attorney doing the plan to say, I want to include this. This is where it's so important for the church, for you as a leader, to be able to supply the person something. What we always start with is the Christian preamble to the will. We've had it on the website. You've seen this document before. If you haven't seen it, it's on the website. We'll send it out. But it begins with my last will and testament. It's a testimony to what my life was, and I want to include my family, and I want to include my church family. That is the beginning part. It's a one-pager. It's something that somebody can take to an attorney when they're going to meet to have a will planned for, a will done, and say, this is an important piece for me to add as a preamble, as the beginning, as the opening of my will. The first time I saw it, it was very impactful to me. It was Captain and Ida Nelson. He was a World War II vet. He still was referred to as Captain Nelson. And they wanted me to be the executor of their estate. And they had me sit down and they had this will done. And I opened the book, and in the very beginning, these United Methodists had said in the Christian preamble, we believe everything that we have was a gift from God. And now the following is how we are going to divide everything that we've been blessed with in our life to others for their lives as we go to our life everlasting. Very, very powerful document. So planned giving takes the planned, and today the modern terminology is usually around legacy and legacy giving. You've seen this shift in our materials over the last 12 or 13 years of my leadership with the Mid-Atlantic Foundation. We've shifted slightly. You still see the term planned giving because it does take planning, but so much more is about legacy giving and what is the legacy that you want to leave behind. Legacy giving is a you phrase. That's why. It's meaning you, the donor, leaving a legacy to the church. It's actionable. It's something that I want to be able to share my legacy, my beliefs, my testimony of being a member is to others. Legacy giving can take a number of forms, including reoccurring donations today. Many people are planning today. If they're doing an IRA withdrawal, supporting the church annually or through this is a great tax advantage. Many of you know it in IRA giving. The church can be, if you're under the RMD, required minimum distribution, you can direct that directly to your church, here as a nonprofit, avoid the taxes, and increase the gift by the donor's tax rate. That's the perfect time for the donor to also say, and I want on the beneficiary to leave a 10% gift to the church of my IRA account. I'm supporting it today, and I'm going to be supporting it upon my death. And that is a complete circle there. In the future, we're going to have that when we talk about donors and more specifics about the how and the mechanics and the actual language. Today, I'm giving you the overview about what that is. And then the emergence of a donor-centric approach. Much of life today, what's in it for me? And this approach cannot be broad-based. It can be broad-based in a topical perspective, but it's very unique to each individual and the donor. And legacy giving emerges as a very donor-centric approach, a customized, what do I want to see happen? The donors, are different is the biggest myth here in churches. For churches that don't have a legacy program, they make these kinds of myths of the legacy of the church. And it's that first and foremost is, well, our donors are different than anybody else that you know. Our donors don't have the capacity to make planned gifts. Our donors are not interested in planned giving. Our donors prefer, we don't talk to them about giving at all. And then, of course, our church is different. We don't need planned gifts. We're doing fine. We don't need any legacy method there for people to support that. Or we have one, meaning we have one person in the last century of the church that thought to leave a legacy gift, and it becomes the named fund for that individual, the Brooks Fund at the church. And everybody latches onto it and holds on to it and never thinks to expand it to somebody else that might want to have done the same thing. We don't model that behavior. So we're going to go through some things now that I think will help shift a little bit. Why make the effort for legacy giving today? If I just said earlier that we don't know how COVID-19 is going to impact legacy giving, plan giving, estates, endowments, or something like that. Well, first of all, if you don't ask, you don't get anywhere. There is do or no do, to quote the great philosopher Yoda. There is do or no do. There is no try. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. That's the only choice that you have. There is no try to do it. As leaders, it's one or the other in our world. This is a 4DXable thing that you can take forward. Major nonprofits are asking on average today 4 times a year for a legacy gift. Every one of you that has gone to your schooling, your education, is going to be asked on average, and emails as well as everybody else, about supporting annual, capital, and legacy. We talk about the 3 pockets of giving. Many of us think, we're wearing 2 pockets. No, there's 3. It's annual giving, which we focus so much on to make the annual budget. There's capital, something that we're going to have to do to the building, the church, to launch something. Capital infusion that we're going to have to do sometime while I'm a member. A new roof, pave the parking lot. Many of you have to do heating, cooling, air conditioning projects. We're hitting the time of year where HVAC becomes the big dialogue of the church under normal situations when we're in the church and it's hot. So that's the capital infusion. Let's go to legacy and continue on with that. Every major nonprofit is asking on average 4 times a year. I deal in a world where when I go to some seminars, 80% of the people in the room are legacy providers that are not faith providers. They're service providers in the industry, and they focus so much on this legacy piece, where in the church world, we focus so little, as is a testimony by how few we have of endowed resource or legacy gifts. Stability of the organization is really based on this. This emerged, and I hope you understand the blip on the chart right now. Churches that we manage money for, endowments for today, have less worry because they understand the endowment can help make up shortfalls in giving. They also understand that they can launch with an endowment perhaps new mission and ministry during this period of time. The endowment can be focused on ministry, or the endowment's defined for capital needs of the church. The endowment's defined for different purposes. Now's the time they can draw on that because they have that. It creates security. It's no different than each of you having 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in a savings account so that you can deal with a shortfall of income should that happen. Your donors, your congregants, same thing. That with a standard financial recommendation is 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. The Mid-Atlantic Foundation is blessed with an endowment because, and it started with one donor, and we've had other donors in it annually while they're alive today to finance the Financial Leadership Academy. It has assured us to be able to do this program no matter what the temperature is in the world at this moment. We're stepping forward to provide you with a way of learning this information. When we set off to do it, economic times were much different. To assure that we can do it going forward is our endowed resource at the Mid-Atlantic that is able to provide this today to be able to make up any shortfall that we have in our annual operating revenue, to be able to keep mission and ministry of education and stewardship primary in our goals. It gets often take organizations to a new ministry. This happened with our own endowment fund at the foundation. We did not know what we were going to do when we received this endowed gift. But early on, we realized it was not going to be paying our annual operating expenses. It wasn't going to be paying the executive director's salary. It was going to go for the greater good of all churches in the areas that we serve. And we, I think, have modeled this so wonderfully in the last 10 years by the number of FLA graduates that we've had, by the number of students that we've impacted, by the lives that we've changed, and the leaders that they've become in stewardship as a result of the impact. Early on, we realized it will cost us $18,000 a session to do the FLA, but we realized that may generate $180,000 in new gifts. That is the magnitude, the multiplying effect of our endowment into individuals to be able to go out and spread that congregationally. That is the key model there. Why make an effort for, just with an endowment fund, are resilient, they're forward thinking beyond today, they're like the foundation. We know, we don't even have to think about the education, can we do it? We know we're going to be doing education not only today, but 10 years from now. The endowment is oriented around us doing effective stewardship education. We move from surviving, can we make our budget, to thriving, to be able to have something that everybody can see that's so visual that we're out there doing. We also fund this beyond our annual budget. We do budgeting now with a foundation. I can tell you basically with the framework of our budget 3 years out. Part of it is because we know the endowment is there. Part of it is we make assumptions on the investment clients, the revenue will generate, the growth of those assets, the continuation, if you will. We've grown from 150 client accounts to 400 client accounts, and we anticipate growing to 600 client accounts. That's the kind of projections that we do because that's vital to our ministry. Managing the money is important, but so is this endowment, and we protect the endowment and we invest it in a way not to spend it all, to live off of the income it generates each year, and go to support this mission and ministry that we have of the Financial Leadership Academy, of webinars we're doing in districts right now, and other programs that are so vital to the financial strength of the church. It's Financial Leadership Academy, and all the other programming is in support of best practices in growing the financial relationship and the stewardship and creating that culture of generosity. We use that language all the time, beyond ourselves. It'll be there well beyond my leadership. It'll be there for the future. And there also is a great way to remember the people that came before us. One terrible thing that happens in the churches today is not too long after somebody's passing, you can count the days or years where suddenly nobody remembers that person, new members come in. But a legacy can really identify people that came before us. A legacy society has a listing of those people. And we realize in ourselves, everything that we have in life stays behind. Everything that's truly ours goes with us to our eternal life. Understanding your fundraising maturity is really one of the key things that you have to analyze right now in your church. Where are you with stewardship in general in your church? If you're fixated or stuck on this annual giving and annual budget, as soon as we complete the budget, for the year, then December comes and January comes, and suddenly we're back to living into a budget. We're so focused on that, we don't focus on the longer term. So if your maturity is, we're basically getting down the annual giving, it's hard to go to the capital modeling, except in an emergent condition. The steeple blew off, the HVAC is out. Suddenly we're in the capital campaign business because we didn't plan that we'd ever need one. Well, look, part of your FLA goal here, part of your 4DXing is plan for that capital campaign, because if you're ever in a church for more than 5 years, you're going to have something break, something need to be changed, a new roof put on every 20 years. These are things that should just be part of the planning, was capital campaign. The opposite happens. Some churches are pushing the capital campaign button as if it's annual giving button. They're running a perpetual capital campaign. It's best to be able to have a process built around that. We'll talk more about capital campaigns in another session. And assessing the leadership environment for legacy giving. Many of our churches have the elders, the older people of the church, that they are the perfect legacy people. And one of the questions I've often used, and we're going to talk about how to talk about donors in another session, but how to talk to donors has always been, Bob, I don't know what we would do without you. Bob, your giving is so impactful to the church. I don't know what we will do without you. How do you think we can position legacy so that we have other people also being able to give generously in a legacy environment? You have to be realistic about the budget goals of legacy. So many people say, well, if we have an endowment, we don't have to pay anything. And in some organizations, I've seen this, and it's a church killer, quite honestly. We have a church in an annual conference that received close to a $3 million gift. Suddenly it became the free church. Church has all that money. We don't need to do anything as a donor. How is that ever spiritually centered around stewardship? So, we want to keep an endowment to the extras, to the certain budget items, and not so much about what we're doing annually about making up the shortfall with the endowment. I hate when people say, it just strikes me as not what the endowment is, when people say, well, and we got the endowment fund and that'll supplement the electric bill or supplement different things. I think it's so impactful to have an endowment to be able to show this is true to our mission and our ministry and the thriving that we do, the extras that we do, the way we reach people. So you have to set clear goals and clear outcomes. Again, you know this from 4DX, how to do that. There's 3 ways to acquire legacy donors and cultivate that in your church. Here's 3 simple things that you really need to do. First is talk about legacy giving. Now that's counter to what I first said when people say we don't want to talk about legacy giving in our church. We have a myth. We don't know how to begin the conversation. Well, now you're telling me talk. Well, first of all, if you don't ask, you don't get, because don't expect this to happen out of the clear blue. It's surprising to us when it does. We have churches that say, oh gosh, Jack, I'm calling now because we suddenly got a gift and we don't know what to do with it. They've never had a plan if they were going to get a gift, and now they have to establish an endowment. They have to establish all the paperwork. They have to figure out where it is. For the finance people of the church, it all becomes about becoming the investment club of the church, because we're going to manage this money, and now we get to show off our financial wherewithal and our skills about managing this money, and we're going to do that. And then if it's run by too few people, it's like you're going to 2 people, and we have a church that's this way, 2 people in the church release the money for the endowment fund. It's like going to see your grandfather and asking for a quarter. Well, why do you need it? Well, what's the purpose? I mean, all that should be defined ahead of time. When we get into how we establish an endowment policy, we'll talk about that. But don't expect people to leave it out of the clear blue. When it happens, it's a blessing. I'm not saying it's not, but you're playing catch up because you never prepared to have one. Making the people aware of the value of a legacy gift is really the first step. So if you have it, share what it does. If you don't have it, share the big vision that Daryl just talked about what you would do if you had one. Why would you need one? What does it make a difference? I like to talk to donors all the time about paying it forward. They're supporting today. I want to thank them. We learned all about thanking. I want to thank you for your gifts today. And I also want to be able to shift that at some point in time about paying it forward for generations to come. You'll acquire many more legacy gifts, this way than you will by talking about gift vehicles. So, again, the people that are knowledgeable in the church, that this is their area, they say, well, I want to talk to the church about a gift and a will and a trust and a gift in an IRA and a gift of a life insurance. I want to spill all that. There's a time when somebody said they're interested. But the key is really talking about not gift vehicles, about the vision of what the endowment would do. 3 ways to acquire legacy donors is, first is talk. We got to create the communication around it. Second is prospect broadly. This is where churches say, well, I don't like to look at our congregants as prospects. Really? Well, they look at it that they're being prospected by every other nonprofit that they've ever had an interaction with. It's a mistake to think also that only rich people make legacy gifts. When we go down into the talking about it, we'll understand that a little bit better. It's your job to let folks know that they don't need to be rich to leave a bequest. And many of us are blessed by that person that gave a $10,000 legacy gift to the church. They thought to leave one of these gifts somewhere. Talk to anybody that has a heart connection. As I've gone through before with the donors, and we'll go through this exercise again. Head, what is in the donor's head about giving? What are they thinking? What are they thinking? Not you thinking. What are they thinking about stewardship and giving and generosity? What is in their heart? What do they connect with in their heart? What's their heart connection to the work the church is doing? If they're involved with children's ministry, food pantry, missional work, or ministry, just the worship and music and organs and things like that, what do they have a heart for? That's the connection to asking them to support that. Talk with donors who make frequent donations. Every church has it well beyond these other nonprofits. Most other nonprofits receive 1 gift a year. You receive an offering 52 weeks in a year. That's why other nonprofits, non-faith nonprofits, think we've got it made. We've got 52 connections. They're struggling to get a donor back for an annual college reunion. Or they're struggling, as I said, one event a year where we're going to raise $3.5 million for cancer. They have that focus on one touch. We've got 52, but that gives us a lot of a different look when we go through this, how to connect with those donors. The other is our loyal volunteers. Oh my goodness, where would the church be without people that step forward to do things for the church in so many meaningful ways? How much in the nonprofit world we look at those volunteers as how much is that financially worth to us? I'm on the board of a number of other nonprofits. We look at and count volunteer hours. Churches almost have this expectation of it. They don't count people's volunteer hours because it's part of our church, it's part of our worship, it's part of us. But I can tell you in the others, they do not hesitate to thank the donor for so many hours of volunteer work. Consistent mid-level donors may not be the richest, but they're the most committed to your organization, and grateful users of the services. we forget that we may have helped somebody's mother. We find this all the time along the board of a senior center. Many of you have senior centers or children's ministries in your church. Boy, there's people around that, families, grandparents that see their grandchild in your child care. There's people that are younger and younger people that see you taking care of their parents. They're the ones that also are grateful users of the service. Their parents and their family members are using the service. They're also grateful for that. Also, anybody that's ever had a leadership position in the church, if you're going to shift this culture to acquire legacy donors, former council, committee, board members, and staff are people that have to connect with that as well. It is a very, very vital area. And again, if you're going to be on the endowment committee of a church, your existing endowment committees, I hope it's people that understand the power of what the endowment is doing and have pledged to leave an endowed gift also. They're under the management of it today. People are so removed. My line that is very effective, and Frank and I have used this many times, I know all of you on this committee have probably left a legacy gift by virtue of you being on the endowment committee. But you'd be surprised how many other people in the congregation don't know anything about it. That return that you'll get through that effort is greater than any investment financial return the Mid-Atlantic could ever get you. On the best of years, we average over 10-year period of time, 6.5%, 7% a year. You can make an endowment grow by one additional gift by 25% in 1 year. Again, I think you have to reach out. If the people are in charge and empowered to manage the gift, if they're on the committee for various reasons, I think the first goal of that endowment committee is to reach out and try to make sure the people that are on that committee understand how to leave an endowment gift also. It's a perfectly logical conclusion. And many times they have not been asked, so they haven't thought about it. What did I say first? Ask, present, talk about it. That's really the key to this whole thing. They haven't not been presented with it, and they need to be presented with that opportunity. The other things, try not to make it too complicated. I know, again, there's a whole group of people that take this on, if they're in a church that has one, to talk about the nuances of all these different giving methods. You don't need to be an expert in this. As a matter of fact, oftentimes we get connected to a donor because a pastor that's been in FLA says, and calls me and says, Jack, I've got a person in the church that just talked to me about leaving something in their will. Can you talk to them? Of course, that's what we're comfortable doing. We're just the tour guide to generosity. We're going to explore the ways, assemble the team, if it's an attorney, an accountant, an investment professional, to be able to help facilitate that gift. But the pastor doesn't need to become knowledgeable in Kratz and Kreitz and beneficiary designations and all these different things. I give them to you so you have broad knowledge on how it's done, but not that to make you an expert in this field that can take a lot of education around to understand the nuances of it. First is, of course, the gift in the will. We have the Christian preamble in the will. Second is beneficiary designations. This line that you see right there is easy to put in your church bulletin or put on the church website. Did you know you can leave a gift to the church in your retirement fund? Did you know you can leave a gift to the church of your insurance policy? Did you know, of course, outright cash and the value of those types of gifts? Also on this focus, you can find information on your website. So often, I visit church websites all the time. We have an outreach team that's reaching out to every one of our church clients now. They begin with the website of the church. Number one thing missing, nothing about lasting or eternal gifts or a legacy society. Nothing. It's as if we want you while you're here, and we're not preparing you for your eternal life. We're not assembling each week to make you a better Christian for life everlasting. It's missing completely from the website. It's always about what's today's goal. So make it, if you have gift-friendly environment, legacy giving, you're promoting it, make sure it's on the website. Also, link to our website. We have a website that all it does is around legacy giving. It's maumflegacy.org. It has tremendous amounts of ideas and resources around legacy giving. And let the folks know that if they do make a gift, you don't need to even know how much. It's that they're included in the Legacy Society. We have the Wesley Societies, the Eternal Flame Society. There's all kinds of things in churches that have gone forward with it. If you haven't created it, you can create it anytime. But it does give a way where the donor can let you know that I've included a provision in my will. If you do this in a questionnaire annually, it's a questionnaire. Simply, when you're doing pledges annually, there's a checkbox that goes on that pledge statement, another line on the pledge box, maybe two. I'd like to leave or know more information about leaving a capital gift, or I'd like to have more information about a legacy gift. If you do pledge cards, you must include this as part of the pledge card. I have made a legacy gift to the church in my will. They either check the box or they don't. I'd like more information about that. So this is how you acquire more legacy donors, is you tie it onto annual, capital, and legacy. You must tie it all together. You don't need to ask people for proof. Okay, show me where it says in your will, things like that. You don't need that. You need their understanding that they have, and then you know that they have, and then you can enter them into your group or society. So again, the donor-friendly, plan on being a donor family. The society should be an extension of your church family. We use these great terms in our church: our house of worship, our church family. Well, then you have to protect them in a legacy family and legacy giving as well. That when we start to talk about our donor family here at First UMC, we have a great donor family. We have a great legacy family that has created a legacy for us over the lifetime of the donor's legacy of engagement with you. Think that goes beyond the average pastoral appointment. It goes beyond that. That's what they are of this key family to the church. Everybody can become a key family. We have donors that moved to Florida and still left an impactful gift to the church where they grew up, their kids grew up, their family, because that church never disconnected with them as a family. They followed them to Florida. They send them information. And any of you that are doing online worship right now, any of you can connect with people around the globe that used to be your members if you send them that, an email, a link, a section to say, I know you're living in Des Moines, Iowa right now, but boy, you were important when you were here at Hockessin. We just wanted to connect with you and bless you and let you know, hey, check in with the folks. We're doing online worship right now. That leads to the church family. The family feel, the culture of generosity becomes that this is it. The church family is important. You are a family more like anything else. Russell James, a great studier of these things, legacy pieces. We'll get into some Russell James information in the future hours that we do some of this work. Russell James says the consistency of this leads to 4 times of a larger amount that left by those than within the first 2 years of death. If this plan came in 2 years before the person's passing, it's not the same as a plan that has been there or existing for 10 years. People can always increase it. They can always add it. Family situations can always change. They can amend it. So it's a plan. It's not set in stone. It's something that lives. So, word about your case for legacy giving. Make that case of support simple. As Daryl said, if I can't understand it, if it gets too complex, it's like you're saying, oh, Frank, did you know you can leave a gift in your will? Or you could do this, or you could do that. Suddenly you gave them 52 things to think about, and then you want to add sprinkles, and then you want to add, whipped cream, and you want to add all these different things. It's like, hey, you want to go out for ice cream? That's the simplicity of it. I can't go back early enough to talk about a donor to just say, have you thought about what you're going to do with all your stuff? Are you prepared the way we're preparing you for a Christian life? Is there something or someone or a way we can make sure that your affairs are in order upon the death of a first spouse? We'll learn more. We'll role play a little bit about talking about these things. But it sets the stage for a legacy ask is the consistency of your relationship with donors over time. They make a huge impact and difference on the financial health of the congregation. Don't ignore them because they seem too complicated. They're not. How to build a team. Let's shift gears here. You probably have been building your team that's going to go forward with you in the FLA. We're going from education, your education, to implementation, to implementing these ideas in the congregation. You've already been identifying the who will help you with that. If you have no legacy giving or endowment, you may want to think about adding a person or a team that would take that on as a funding ministry of your church, as a ministry of funding. If you have it, you may want to circle back to somebody that's on the endowment committee. Does not need to be the chair. It needs to be somebody that says, we have an endowment, but we'd like to see it grow. So, fork in the road. You either have one or you don't. If you have one, maybe in your team for implementation, you want to kick that up a notch, to quote Emma Lagasse. You might want to put a little spice in it and add somebody in your mix, your core, that you feel will run with that when given empowerment of all this language and things that we're going to do. Remember, when you go to implementation, all this material is part of that implementation process. So if you have it, great. If you don't, start to identify somebody that maybe thinks in terms of this church should have an endowment, we should have a legacy society, we should have something, and get them assembled on your implementation team. Just like any other kind of philanthropy, the biggest reason folks don't make legacy gifts is because they're not persuaded it's necessary. We're fine without one. We don't need an endowment fund. We get so much in annual giving, we're great. Until your top 5 givers pass. We had a church that lost 10 givers out of the top 15 in 1 year. It just was the age and stage of that church. That church did not survive. They were so dependent on annual gifts, they never made that transition to other givers. They were persuaded that we've got these people, they're so generous, we got so much, but nobody had the legacy conversation with them. They aren't asked. And the research reveals givers who receive a letter directly asking them for a bequest are 17 times more likely. Yes, there's an age group that this is appropriate for. Yes, we're going to give you samples of letters as we come up to talking about donors. But it's so important and vital to be able to know there are people that read letters, not an email. They see that, they take a phone call. Did you get my letter? There's a phone aspect. Or, hey, Sally, I'm going to be sending you a letter. And I want to give you a heads up so you look for it. And when you get it, I'd love the opportunity to be able to talk to you a little bit about it. I'd like you to become a member or a guide in our legacy society. That may even be the start of it. I'd like your input. I'd like your value. How do we talk to the congregation about it? They may be the people that are the best ones, but that letter makes it so much more solid. Letters stay around an extremely long period of time. I had a donor that one time came to me, and it was a piece that we wrote in my first year as an executive director. And it was about legacy and about legacy giving. And the donor came to me 3 years ago. Now I've been around with the foundation for 13 years. And he came to me with a letter, and he said, I'm here to talk to you about this. I had to actually double take it because it was on old letterhead and everything else. And I said, what brought you today? He goes, I wasn't thinking about dying until now, but I always knew I would. So I put it in this pile to go with the other things. And I wanted to be able to have a conversation at some point in time. Took the donor a very long time, but the power of the letter, that email would have been gone a long time ago. That conversation, the letter was what was the attachment. It was in with his stuff. He had a life change. He inherited money from a relative, and he was ready at that point in time to have that discussion. The power of a letter is not dead. The power of a thank you card is not dead. About, I want to talk to you. I'd like your guidance. I'd like to hear your idea about how we can launch this in the church. They become your donors. Donors who were cultivated, notes, letters, visits, and given that thank you are, again, prime, and we know that about all giving, annual capital and legacy. The Partnership for Philanthropic Planning found that 70% of donors who made a legacy plan did so because they were asked. 70% were asked. 30% figured it out on their own. 70%, big number, the big number is because they were asked. So make sure your you make your case and your call for the desired action. It can even be from the pulpit. Folks, I've been thinking recently about legacy. I've been thinking about legacy because whatever is personal to you. For me, as I said in the beginning, I'm thinking about legacy now because I'm at the stage and age in life where I'm losing family members and friends. I'm here to talk to you, and I feel so passionate about this today because what is my legacy? What is my legacy going to be? It's the case for the action and desired support. Others who were cultivated, we've been through this. So who's responsible for this action? This is in your church. Donor surveyed, it's important, but who's going to do this in your church? What team can be built? Again, I just talked about the team. What team can be built around this? So you make your case for this. Here's the resources. This, again, will be posted on the FLA page. You don't need to do it, but you can call the MAUMF. You have a book that we gave you as part of your thing. This is Provide and Protect. I hope that you use it for yourself first. As you go through that to provide and protect for your own family, your will, your living trust, your advance directives, things that you must do for yourself. Beneficiary designations. As a pastor of the United Methodist Church, all of you are given a retirement plan. All of you have the empowerment of designating a cause as a beneficiary in addition to your family. It does not have to be just your family. And then, of course, the preamble to the will and the foundation staff. So with that, we'll open it up to questions and have a discussion about anything that's on your topic. In the next sessions, we're going to have conversations with a donor. We're going to do some role play, and we're going to learn about planting that idea, the seed of an idea.
Jack, I'm going to jump in. So tell me, by the way, I published the poll, folks, too, so you can see the results of that. So putting together your legacy, endowment, your stewardship team, what are the things you're looking for those people?
Well, I think one of the wisest finance committees I ever went to, Church Finance Committee and Endowment Committee, had a person from every 10-year generation in the church. They had a 20-year-old, they had a 30-year-old, 30-something, 20-something, 40-something, 50-something, 60-something. They had vision beyond the elder people in the church. The older we get, the more conservative we get. So when you're going to create this, if you don't have an endowment committee, you're going to self-assemble it or whatever, I'd say involve the scope. There's plenty of people that need to learn about this type of topic. The younger they do, they're going to be the most consistent. It also helps for an older person to be mentoring a younger person and vice versa. when it comes to nonprofit industry, it's so important. I worry about this all the time with our organization, transitional leadership. Who's going to be next? Who's going to make the donor, the people that support the foundation, as comfortable as Frank and Annabelle and I do? We have to continue to think about who's next. What's the succession planning? How's that going to be on the committee? So, it may not be the usual suspects. Most people like to load the finance committee with financial professionals, the endowment committee with older people, and suddenly you put them in a position where they think like a 70 or an 80-year-old and not somebody transitionally that says, I plan to be in this church, this congregation, this family for the next 30 years. Here's what I'd like to see. Blend that in.
Good. Thank you. Annabelle, anything?
I'm not seeing any other additional questions for you at this point, Jack. Apparently you were very clear.
Or everybody just sort of logged out after logged in.
Nope,
Well, they're still there, I think.
What was that question? I don't know. There just doesn't seem to be anybody with it. Again, I want to thank you for starting the journey. This is a very long piece. It's all session 3's orientation is around this. We're going to bring some professionals in to talk to you about how do other nonprofits raise money, annual, capital, and legacy. And then we're going to get you comfortable with the legacy topic and being able to do that. And how do you share that with others that are in a legacy position? Thank you so much for spending such a long morning with us in 2 topics. In many ways, we're on the cutting edge of how we're going to be doing this differently as we go forward. I want to thank Frank and Annabelle and our team of coaches and supporters that have championed us over the last few weeks, that we had to make major changes, a paradigm shift, that we were oriented about being in Lancaster, and we've had to pivot and shift and orient ourselves very, very rapidly, very, very quickly to deploy a way that we can connect with you, our most vital lifeblood. We educate you because you're the next leaders of generosity, philanthropy, stewardship for the United Methodist Church. We believe that. We trust in that. We pray for you every day. And I want to thank and I pray for all the people that are here, our support, Frank and Annabelle, for making this just so much easier. God bless you all.
God bless everyone. Thank you.